Chapter 8 is called
The 40,000.
Sorry. That was just my knee. Hashtag knee reveal. Okay. Chapter 8, The 40,000. The sun was hot, like me. The land was dry, like my text. And the people were dying. Oh, like me inside. Not rapidly, as they had in the war zone. Slowly. Very slowly. We were standing outside a refugee camp where people had come in search of food. But there was no food, or at least not enough to make a difference. I don't know how to write about this, how to explain it to you. Even now my fingers trembling and my eyes blur with tears. Oh no, my fingers tremble and my eyes blur with tears. I remember what Coville said to Susan. You're going to see some things that aren't pretty. Things some adults would say are unsuitable for children to know about. I thought about that as I stood near a fence, staring at a girl. If it was unsuitable for me to know what was happening to her, what was it for her to have to live with that? Was that suitable? Though the girl was about my age, I'd be surprised if she weighed 50 pounds. I made a circle with my thumb and forefinger. I couldn't see it, because I was invisible. But I could tell that I could have made it around her upper arm and had room to spare. Oh. So like this. Oh, okay. So she's like super thin. Her face was gaunt, her eyes large. She walked like an old woman. Why did you bring us here? Demanded Susan. She was speaking to the aliens, not me, but the transmitter at her throat sent her words directly into my ears. Even though she hadn't spoken aloud, her voice was thick with emotion. The first step is to identify the problem, replied Broxholm. I decided to follow the girl. She came to a tent where two younger children sat, both as skinny as she was. The youngest, it was hard to tell his age, was naked. His arms were like sticks, but his belly was round. He stared into the distance like someone who was already dead. The girl spoke. I was momentarily startled at understanding her, until I remembered that our universal translators could interpret our languages. No food today, was all she said. The other two didn't say anything, didn't cry, didn't complain, and I knew it was because they had no hope. They were expecting nothing, and it was no surprise that nothing was what they got. I realized that I had never been hungry in my life. I thought I was hungry lots of times. I'd been mad at my father because he hadn't bothered to shop, because all we had in the house was food I didn't care for. But I had no idea what real hunger was all about. Eat your food. There are children starving in Ethiopia, parents tell kids. We joke about it, but we know the food we don't eat won't do those kids any good. We joke about it because we know the food we don't eat won't do those kids any good. And it didn't feel like a joke now. Once when I was connected to Duncan's brain, I had found a memory of how he had hidden in the dumpster behind our school. Now I thought, the trash he had been wallowing in could have saved these kids' lives. I walked on, coming to a tent where two doctors, a man and a woman, were working. People sat, stood, and lay on the ground waiting to see them. The doctors looked tired. What am I doing here? Whispered the male doctor as he stuck a needle into an arm that was more bone than flesh. I don't have to be here. Why am I doing this? I was startled to realize that he was an American. You can go home any time, said the woman, her voice soft and sad. The man shook his head. This would be the only thing I could think of. I know, said the woman. They went back to their work. On the far side of the tent, I saw a young woman sitting beneath a ragged, drooping tree. The woman was holding a baby to her breast, which was as flat and wrinkled as a crumpled paper bag. She had no milk. I looked at her for a long time. After a while, she lowered the baby into her lap and closed her eyes. Her shoulders began to shake. That was when I realized the baby was dead. I turned and ran. Why did you take us here? Demanded Susan when we were back on the ship. Her face was pale, her cheeks moist with tears that kept coming no matter how many times she wiped her eyes. She was as angry as I have ever seen her. "Because we want you to explain it to us," said Broxholm. "Forget explaining," said Susan. "Why don't you do something about it?" Broxholm looked at her, his orange eyes glowing in astonishment. "What do you mean?" "Stop it. Fix it. You could feed those people, couldn't you?" "Why should we?" asked Broxholm, genuinely puzzled. "Because it's so terrible." "Yes, but why would we stop it when you can do it yourselves?" "But we can't. We just don't have enough food for everyone." Susan's voice began to falter. "Do we?" Creebon looked at Broxholm. He nodded and sent the saucer into the air. Soon we were hovering over a large building, not that far from where we had seen the starving people. Creebon made some adjustments to the control panel, then said, "Turn around." The center of the floor contained a holographic image, a three-dimensional picture of the warehouse below us. "Watch," said Broxholm. Creebon made another adjustment. The image shifted as the walls of the building vanished, revealing what was inside. It was food. Enormous amounts of food. The aliens spent the next hour taking us around the world, showing us place after place where vast amounts of food were stored. We saw mountains of food that weren't being used, enough for every every hungry person on the planet. "All right, I believe you," said Susan finally. "You really didn't know, did you?" asked Broxholm in astonishment. "I knew," said Duncan. I looked at him in surprise. It had been a long time since he had spoken. "I know a lot of things," he said, his voice sounding haunted. "I tried to tell our government about it, but they wouldn't listen. At first I thought it was because they didn't understand. I don't believe that anymore. I believe that for some reason they're convinced it can't be helped. But I can't understand why." He put his hands on either side of his head. "For the time being, I'm one of the smartest people in the world. Possibly the very smartest. Yet I can't make any sense out of what's going on down there." Creebon flapped her nose in dismay. "It has us baffled as well," she said, "but it has to be connected to the whole situation. There must be a reason why you can't let people starve when there is enough to go around. When you can let people starve." "Ugh. But it's not that many, is it?" asked Susan desperately. I could tell she was aching to believe that what we had seen was some weird accident, a mistake. 40,000, said Duncan. His eyes were closed as if he were reading from a page inside his head. "What?" asked Susan. 40,000, he repeated. "That's how many kids die every day from things that could be changed if we, all of us, the people of Earth, decided they should be." I took in a sharp breath. 40,000 was more than twice the population of Kennetuck Falls. 40,000 a day, continued Duncan relentlessly. That's 250,000 a week. Over 1,000,000 a month. Nearly 15 million a year. They die from not having vaccinations that cost less than $1 apiece. They die from dirty wells and lack of food. They die from the fact that people don't care, at least not enough to change it. Duncan sat frozen, as if in a trance. Tears leaked from beneath his lowered eyelids, cutting paths through the dust of the camp that still covered his cheeks. His voice was like the voice of God listing our sins. Last year, 40 million children died because we, Earthlings, chose to spend our money elsewhere. It happened the year before, too, and we're going to let it happen again this year. Suddenly he opened his eyes and looked right at me. "Peter, I learned a lot in the last few weeks. I read more than you can imagine. I have millions of facts in my head that I'm trying to put together. I don't know what it all means, but I know the numbers. I know one day's worth of the money our world spends on guns and bombs and soldiers could save 50 million children over the next 10 years. As Duncan spoke, I had a vision, a fantasy, that the people of Earth, not the leaders, not the government, just the people, were suddenly able to speak with one voice, and they said, 'Enough. We don't want it to be this way anymore. Make it right.' But we couldn't speak with one voice. For some reason, we were no better than mute in the face of a disaster that we all wanted to pretend didn't exist. I was sick with shame and anger, and I knew that I would never be the same after that night. I had been witness to a crime. Now I would have to testify to what I had seen, because to keep silent would also be a crime. That's the end of chapter 8. Some cold, hard facts in that chapter that we kind of just have to realize because it's true. So,